Hello Year 12 Extension 1. If you're watching this and you haven't seen the must watch for corrections video, then please stop this one and go back and watch the one that's on the previous page in your OneNote, because it's most important that you get the corrections and you get the little bit of the explanation about how this is confusing. You can see there that I've actually mentioned that the notation gets a little bit confusing because of the introduction of the lowercase t for the coefficient. So in this exercise, we're going to identify the greatest coefficient. Now, this method is based on the assumption that the coefficients will increase until a certain point, and then at a certain point, the coefficients will decrease. When that's the case, you can see that there comes a point where, at a position where there's a distinct change in the ratio of the coefficients. So if we looked at the coefficients of the line in Pascal's triangle, where we've got 1, 4, 6, 4, 1, it's possible to see that the ratio of the coefficients, so the second coefficient over the first, 4/1, is definitely greater than 1. 6/4 is definitely greater than 1. However, when we get to this position, we get 4 on 6. It's now less than 1. So this is what we mean, that the coefficients seem to rise to a point and then they fall. We want to establish where this position is. Now, that we're going to focus on the actual coefficients. And remember, the coefficient, the position or the name given to the coefficient, doesn't reflect the position of that term. And in fact, the position of that term is one more than the name given to the coefficient. We're still going to keep that the coefficient that has nck minus 1 would have x to the k minus 1. And the coefficient would look like this and this combined together. However, if we had to name the position, then it's the kth position. It's one more than the name applied to the actual coefficient. The k plus 1th term or position has in it the coefficient nck and whatever other numerical value is incorporated into a term. Both of those put together make the coefficient. The formula for calculating this ratio between terms is we look at and lowercase t is the abbreviation for the coefficient. We look for the k plus 1th coefficient, that ratio over the one before it, the coefficient called the kth coefficient, we look for that to be greater than 1. And at the point that it is greater than 1, this becomes the greatest coefficient. But remember, if it has coefficient named k plus 1, coefficient named k plus 1, it will actually be in the overall position in terms of the number for the term. It will be k plus 2 term. Many of the questions you're going to do out of this exercise just get you to identify k, identify the k plus 1th coefficient, and for some reason in this textbook they don't actually ask you which actual term it is. However, in the previous textbook, that was also a common aspect to the question. Not only did they want the greatest coefficient, they wanted you to also identify the position, the actual position. So just remember, if you can remember the connection between the coefficient being, the greatest coefficient being the coefficient, which we'll name as k plus 1, it's actually one more than that in terms of the name of the term it belongs to in an expansion. Hopefully that's enough of the confusing bit, because once we've got that little bit, the actual ratio that we want to solve is the coefficient, which we're going to call k plus 1, the coefficient k plus 1 over coefficient k. It's pretty easy to identify, because then it is simply coefficient k has the nck and any coefficient, other number within the binomial, and the coefficient k plus 1 is nck plus 1. So, and again, any other number associated or any other coefficient appearing in the actual binomial. Now, the actual process for the actual process to find k involves this ratio of the coefficient k plus 1 over the coefficient k. And as you know, within each coefficient, within that, there'll be an nck plus 1 calculation. And like I've said, any other term to a power that will also contribute to the coefficient. So, and you know from that the definition of nck plus 1 is n factorial over n minus k plus 1 factorial times k plus 1 factorial. So just the top of this fraction contains a fraction. Likewise, this bottom part of our ratio of coefficients, within that there will also be a fraction. So most questions just get you firstly to focus on working out the simplified version of the coefficient k plus 1 over coefficient k. And yeah, I will do an actual example in another video because it will get too long. The video will get too long again. But here it says correctly that this will be your greatest coefficient, but it belongs to the k plus 1 more, k plus 2 actually actual term.